Welcome to Craft Chat Chronicles, the go-to podcast for tips on crafting best-selling fiction. Here at Craft Chat Chronicles, we bring you expert interviews, insights, and tips on writing, publishing, and marketing. For workshops, show notes, and more information, visit J.D.Myall.com.
Episode 11 of Craft Chat Chronicles, we have Disney author Emma Theriault. Emma has written Rebel Rose, which is a Beauty and the Beast novel for Disney. In this episode, she talks writing IP for Disney. She talks her publishing journey and gives you a lot of valuable insight on writing and publishing. And she discusses her new novel, A Lady Would Know Better. Welcome, Emma, and enjoy, everyone.
How are you?
Doing good. How about yourself? So tell me a little bit about your writing journey.
I signed with my first agent in 2016. So that was ages ago now. And we went on sub pretty quickly with a YA fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sort of, in retrospect, it was sort of on the cusp of the big boom sort of ending. So I think we went in with like stars in our eyes and, you know, sort of big expectations for what it could do. And it got a lot of interest, but ultimately just, it didn't sell. So, you know, we got an offer for like a digital deal from like a really big editor, but that just wasn't what me or my agent envisioned for the book. So we were like, okay, let's pivot, let's do something different. And I had another book sort of die on sub. So it's been a bit of a journey, but then with Rebel Rose, my debut, which came out a couple of years ago, it was actually an audition situation. So it was an IP project. My agent got an email, a pitch from the editor at Disney and asked if I was interested in auditioning for it. And I didn't think I would get it. I was interested, of course, but I thought it would be more of a learning experience. Like, this is how you pitch, you know, a project on proposal and stuff like that. And I thought it would be fun. Because, you know, usually these flashy IP projects go to people like Sarah J. Maas or like somebody with an existing following. So I did not anticipate actually getting it. And then found out that I got it and had to very quickly write a book, which was not how I've written books in the past. So yeah, so that came out in November 2020. So obviously that was a bit of a different experience than your average debut experience back in 2020. And, you know, I was given all of these opportunities that didn't end up working out because of the pandemic. So it was a different kind of learning experience.
What was it like doing the IP project with Disney? Are they very like strict with the outline? Do you have some input in it? How does that work?
No, I mean, I went in assuming that I'd be very restricted and very much tied to an outline or to a vision that, you know, maybe wouldn't be mine. And I thought that would be a learning experience too, like how to write, you know, not necessarily the story that I'm passionate about, but from the start, when I got the pitch, if you're not familiar, it's a story about Belle after the Happily Ever After. And the pitch was Belle after the French Revolution. And I studied history, so I'm a bit of a history nerd. So I went into the project asking if I could change the pitch, because to me, the more interesting story would be just before the French Revolution and how Belle and the Beast react to it. So my agent at the time was like, you know, I'm not sure that they'll be into changing the pitch, but I'll ask. And I was like, yeah, please do. Like, I'll do it either way, but could I just see if they're open to this? And they were right away. So I auditioned with something that was already different from what they had asked for. Taking a bit of a risk there, but I just knew that it was a more interesting story to tell. So I did everything I could to write a story that I thought would appeal to them, but also worked for me. And yeah, so when they chose it, I didn't know if they'd, you know, come out with a binder of like, you have to do all of this and it has to follow these really strict orders. But no, I was sort of given the opportunity to write the outline myself. Like my editor was like, you know, I can write an outline or you can write an outline or we can, you know, whatever. So I think that in a different circumstance, I would have loved her input, but I had a really clear vision from the start of how I wanted to write this book.
Mhm.
And I wrote the outline. She approved of it, obviously. Like we went back and forth, and it was more like a normal editor agent or editor author relationship in
Mhm.
that, she read what I wrote, she had her input, and I never dealt with anybody larger than my editor. I'm sure that it went through approvals that I don't know about, but it was so much more freedom than I thought. And I'm just so happy. It was a great collaborative process.
I love that. So what was the 2020 debut? What did that feel like? Because I know it was hard in the pandemic and lots of people talked about 2020 debuts, but I hadn't really had the experience of speaking to someone who lived it yet.
Yes, yeah. It was certainly trial by fire. I went into the year quite excited. So in January, I was starting to get all these emails, like they were going to send me to Book Expo. It was going to be this big splashy experience that I had been dreaming of for, like, I signed with my agent in 2016. So I've long wanted that kind of journey.
Mhm.
And so I was elated, like, I can't believe I'm going to get this opportunity. And then, of course, it didn't happen. I remember getting an email from my agency, probably in early March, late February, early March, where we sort of knew that it was starting, and it was a very professional email, and it was like, it's up to you if you want to do these things. Like, we didn't know how big it was going to be yet, and they were just sort of like, you can do stuff, but like you don't have to. And I was still, I was very ignorant still, and was like, no, I want to do whatever I can for this book. Like I'm willing to take the risk. And then of course everything shut down, rightfully so, of course. So I wasn't able to do those things. So we really had to pivot. And bookstores were mercifully open again by November. So I know that a lot of debuts who came before me didn't even get to go into a bookstore and look at their books, which would have been like particularly painful. But no, I went in with my Beauty and the Beast mask on. I got to hold my book the day it came out. So I'm so grateful for that. And I'm also grateful that we got to do these, we did virtual events. So I did one with Victoria Aveyard, my friend, and then I did another one with Danielle Clayton, who is just so amazing. So it's just super cool in that way, that I don't think I would have had the opportunity to do events with authors like that in the real world. Like if we had I live in Canada, so it's a bit of an ask to get to people to come to me. So that was like a silver lining, and it's made it so that going forward, I'm going to make sure to always do virtual events alongside my in-person events, because it's so much more accessible for everybody, and I'd love to just reach as many people as possible. So
I love that. You mentioned your agent. What agent and agency are you in?
okay, so this was with my old agent. I was with Susie Townsend at New Leaf, and then I pivoted again. My journey is all about pivoting. When we tried to sell more YA fantasy, and it wasn't really working. And during the year of my debut, so during the height of COVID, I couldn't really read YA. I was like, I can't get my headspace there. So I read probably 70 plus romance novels in a row. And historical romance in particular. So I decided I wanted to write one. And then it just made sense with my old agent. Like, she wasn't really working in that realm of publishing anymore. So we amicably parted ways, but I signed with my new agents, Carrie Pistrito and Katie Gasandi at Laura Dale Literary Agency. And they represent my books going forward, and they loved my historical romance. So we're working on other stuff too, which is great.
Now, how did you find her? Did you find her through the slush pile, or was there a referral?
So when I was querying again, so the first time I queried, I didn't actually query. Susie had reached out to me, so I got to avoid that altogether. So I thought, I'm so glad I never have to query. But then,
How did she find you?
yeah, of course, I did have to in the end. So I had several referrals for a bunch of really great agents, and I connected with a lot of them. But a lot of them weren't really like, though there was the Bridgerton boom, historical romance is still a very difficult genre and category to break out into. So, I had a lot of agents who really loved the writing and really loved everything about it, but were like, I just can't, I don't know how, I don't think I'm going to be able to sell this. Like, I'm worried, they don't want to disappoint you. So it was a bit frustrating. Like, I just wanted to be like, let's take the risk though. I'm willing to, I've faced rejections for a long time now, but so I had already mentally moved on, I think, because that's what you do, right? When you face years and years of rejection, you're very good at being like, okay, moving on. Time to pivot again. But I got the email from Carrie, and she had said that she had been looking for a project to rep with Katie, because Katie was a newer agent at the agency, and that they both loved mine, and would I be willing to work with them both? And I was like, of course, like that sounds wonderful. So, you've got Carrie with like the experience and, the relationships with editors and the publishing industry and stuff, and knowledge. And then Katie is just like young and excited. Not that she needs to be young. I don't mean no ageism here. I just mean new into the industry. And so it was the best of both worlds for them. And so, it happened over a couple of months, but obviously anybody who's ever queried knows that it's very torturous. And I used to think that sub was the worst, but I think querying might be a little tiny bit worse, because when you're on sub, you at least know you've got somebody on your side in the industry, like your agent. But when you're querying, you're just adrift. So it was a annoying process, but I'm glad it got me where I am.
That's cool. So back to the Disney, it was a flat fee.
I don't know how much I'm allowed to say, because I did sign some stuff, but no, it was not the deal I went in thinking it would be. It was an advance in royalties. So.
Oh, cool! I didn't know that, because most people say that usually IP projects.
That's what I went in thinking it would be, but no, it was a more traditional or whatever sort of deal. So I think there's advantages and disadvantages to both, obviously. So
that's cool. Love that for you.
Thank you.
The royalties have to be cute. They have to be cute.
I mean, it's a popular character, so the sales. I don't want to say too much,
but you're not crying. We'll take that as a good thing. Those are your tears you were sipping. So
no.
So we discussed how you got your agent. We discussed the querying process this time around. Tell me how submission went for you.
Oh boy, yeah. So it's an interesting story, because it did take.
I'm sorry. Can I stop you real quick?
Okay.
Do you have your query letter by chance?
I don't have it with me, but I could send it to you.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just curious to see.
Sure, I'll send it to you.
Okay.
So submission actually took a long time, and it was over a year actually on subs. So, I didn't go into it expecting it to be fast, given my previous experience with sub, and it was a lot of the same sorts of responses that I got when querying, where people love it, but just because Bridgerton's doing well doesn't mean historical romance is this hot genre that everybody wants to get their hands on. So some frustrating passes. But with my current, we didn't end up sending it to the editor who bought it until this fall, because my agents had a meeting with Entangled where they were sort of discussing, not me, but what they've got, what they're looking for going forward. And somebody mentioned that my editor, Erin, is looking for historical romance. So my agents jumped on that. And then it was a super quick process once that happened. So even though it took a really long time, it was fast in the end. I went into Christmas knowing that an offer would be coming in January. And then we've announced, we have a full cover, and it's going to come out in January. So it's so much faster than my previous experience, where I auditioned in 2018 and it didn't come out until the end of 2020. Now it's boom, boom, boom. I didn't think I'd have a book out next year because of the timelines we're normally working with. And then all of a sudden I have one coming out in January. So so it was fast, fun. I'm really excited. I love the whole team. Everybody at Entangled is super, super driven, super excited about romance. So
love that. What are your plans for launch and all that stuff?
Well, so I'm a bookseller, so part-time. So I think I'm going to do a launch at my bookstore, which will be very fun. It's it's small, but I love it. So, but I was actually just discussing, there's a bookish content creator that I'm friends with on Instagram, and she was actually reaching out to me today being like, I want to do a panel of romance authors from Ottawa, because although we're a small, we're not small, there's a million people here, but we're not New York, or like where all these like authors sort of gather. But there are actually quite a few romance authors. So I think we're going to try to time some sort of romance panel with all of us around then. So that'll be really fun. Like we've got Ruby Barrett, we've got Maggie North, who's about to debut. So we've got Amy Lee, who's amazing. So yeah, it would be really fun to be able to tie a couple of different events. You know, like I haven't talked to my publicity team yet. That's later this month, but I would love to do any sort of convention. Like they look so fun. I would do an event in Toronto would be really cool because it's close enough that I can take the train and there's like a wider audience there. So yeah, I'm open to anything. I'd love to meet readers. That's been a thing that obviously if you debuted during the pandemic, you didn't really get to do. So it's like you feel like you missed out on a pretty like important and special part of an author's journey. So I'll be grateful for anything I get to do.
Have you started any swag or anything like that yet?
Not yet, but I know I'm gonna definitely want to get some bookmarks. And now that I've got a cover and have seen it, like I'm hoping that I get to use elements of it because it's just so cute. And it's like a cute animated romance cover, and I just love it. It's the cover of my dreams. So I am gonna definitely do stuff. It's hard to do anything bigger than a bookmark in Canada because once you start mailing those, pins out or stuff like that, it gets really expensive.
Okay, so what was the hardest part of the debut process for you the first time versus now? Like what?
It's a good question.
Any surprises, whichever way you prefer.
Yeah. So I think, zooming out from the pandemic and stuff like that, I try not to tie it to that because that was difficult in its own way. But I think it's realizing the things you can control versus the things you have absolutely no control over. And it's not always obvious. And, it's not, it's a difficult thing to balance and to understand because we're so primed to be stressed about every little thing. And, we have a team around us now, but their energy is not best used telling you like it's okay, you don't need to worry about this specific thing or like this specific thing, or we're not gonna be able to make that happen for you. So I think figuring out what you can control and what you can put your energy into is really important because it's finite. You can't be sitting there panicking over your bad Kirkus review or whatever ends up happening. You need to focus instead on the positive. So going into this debut, I've been not much more relaxed, obviously, because I think you're always going to be a little bit stressed, but it helps to know, what is a big deal and what definitely isn't. So I've tried to in our Discord, I'm not some wise voice of reason or anything, but it's helpful, I think, to have somebody tell you straight up, and I definitely did when I was going through my first debuting, having author friends or different people be like, you don't need to worry about that. That is not worth getting stressed out over. And here's the things that are before I had my newsletter, I was like, okay, should I be doing this? Should I be doing this? Like now that I have this book coming out next year, and Martha Waters, another romance author, was like, you don't need to do anything. Like you don't even have a cover. I didn't even have pre-order links at the time. She was like, you're not actually missing out on anything. You're not, you can just dial it back. And then I was like, what about a newsletter? And she was like, actually, that would be fine. Like, that's perfect because start gathering people now. Sure. And their expectations are not going to be like, show me the cover right away. Show me like all this. So obviously in the romance writing world, newsletters are really important. I mean, they're important everywhere, but romance readers really gravitate towards the newsletter. So I'm really glad I started that.
Love that. Love that. Let's see. What strategies have you started as far as like building an author platform? Have you been?
Well, definitely the newsletter. So that was, I think, important to not get out of the way, but to get a footing in that world. And I put a little bit more effort into it than I would have before, I think. So I'm trying to plan things out, think about what readers want to see specifically from authors, and, not just send out pointless newsletters. I think a lot of authors are really, really good at knowing exactly, like Victoria Schwab's newsletter, every time I get it, it's settling in to read the most interesting letter your coolest friend sends you, so it's just looking at what other authors are doing really well and trying to emulate it as best as I can. So it's important, I think, to know what will work for you. Like, you don't have to do what everyone is doing. You don't have to do all the things that you see people doing. You don't know what they've got going on in their lives or what sort of energy they can bring, but picking those little things that can work for you and then building upon them. So like, I don't want to burn out with promo long before the book comes out, but it's fun to make that little Canva post that has your release date that you just found out, and like, mention that in your newsletter and stuff like that. So I'm definitely I think I'm going to maybe get some art done, I think. So I'll see. I'm going to discuss with the team because I don't know what their expectations are there, but I'd really love to have some sort of print or something that I can include or at least reference back to when I talk about my book and stuff like that. Yeah, it's fun finding what works best for you, I think.
I like that. So with your newsletter, what are the elements you think that you're thinking of including? Like, is it going to be personal narrative? Is it going to be sharing things you love?
Yeah. So my favorite newsletters are just people talking about what they love. Like, I love what people are interested in and what they're passionate about, even if it's not something that I'm interested in. And in fact, I'd prefer it if I know nothing about it. So, it's my last one that I just sent out. I've only done two. So my first one was sort of here's my journey so far, like a bit longer of a version of what I've told you. And it was really interesting, actually. After I sent it out, I got 1, 2 or 3 different emails or DMs from people being like, oh, I'm like, I'm in a similar place as you were. And it's so nice that you're sharing like the ups and downs. And to me, it's like, I wasn't trying to be particularly like open. That's just how I talk about it. I'm not going to sugarcoat. So that pinged in my brain as like, people like, authenticity or like telling the truth about certain parts of your journey. So I'm never going to shy away from that. But I also love to just talk about the things that I love. So in my last one, I decided that I'd do not a full book club, because obviously I don't have, that many readers yet, but it's fun to build it up. So I'm going to start reading like backlist romance from like legends and like the books that I missed as, I didn't really start my romance reading journey until, like, aside from what, I stole from like my mom when I was like a teenager. But my journey really began in 2020. So I feel like there's so much I missed. So I'm going to go on this little mini journey through my newsletter where I read these like amazing books that aren't, being hyped about on Book Talk right now because they came out 20 plus years ago. So yeah, so that's going to be fun, I think. And hopefully people join in and stuff and it can become like a discussion.
I love that. That's cute.
Yeah.
What do you think you did right that helps you break in and become the novelist and twice debut that you are?
I think that the most important quality that I honed or like clung to is persistence. If you don't enter your career in 2016 and emerge in 2024 with like only one book out and like one in the works, without knowing that like there were so many places where I wanted to give up, where it didn't necessarily feel worth it to me in that moment, but I never ever allowed myself to. Like, I never gave myself permission to quit, even though I knew I had it. It was like, no, but what at the end of the day, what I want to do more than quit is keep going. So I knew that I had to want it more than I wanted. Like, I had to want to write more than I wanted to be published. So that was important to me. And if that ever changed, if I ever decided, the writing isn't fun anymore, or I can't do this anymore, then I would have quit. So persistence is like such an underrated quality, I think, to have in this industry and to any creative industry, because there's so many no's along the way. There's so much that can derail a career. So yeah, it's just deciding it's worth it to keep going and that you are passionate about what you're doing. So every time I've talked about it with friends, like, or with readers, that's what I say. Like, if you have to want it so bad that you don't mind the hard parts.
What are the core elements of a successful novel? Like, what do you think makes a good book?
I think that the most important is not necessarily your craft on a prose level. It's the inability for a reader to put a book down, and you can't really teach that. You can get better at it, of course, like once you're an author who's getting feedback and stuff like that. But it's such an ineffable quality. Like people love to complain about some of these really popular book talk books because they're not well written. But what I think that a lot of people don't realize is that there's so much more to writing than just having beautiful prose. And those authors are succeeding at a really difficult part of writing, and that's hooking readers from the start and like not letting them let go until the end. So if that's something that I can improve upon, I would love to improve upon that, because you can't teach it, I don't think. It's like you need to read a lot to try to break down what they're doing right. And at the end of the day, these are just authors for whom that talent is like a very natural part of their process, I think.
I love that. What makes a good villain?
What makes a good villain?
Or antagonist?
Yeah. I think it's cliche at this point, but it's that they're not the villain in their own story. Like their drive is so compelling, and it's almost that you want to be able to understand the villain. You're not supporting them, but I love a villain where I'm reading it and I'm like, yes, like this makes sense. This is earned. This sort of like antagonism between the characters is believable. So you want a real person or creature or whatever. But they have to like earn their villainy. So I love it when it makes sense. So a cartoonish villain is not my favorite type of villain, but obviously they have their place as well.
And what makes a good protagonist?
Somebody that you can't let go of. I don't like Susie Townsend, my old agent, always says that she'll follow a good character anywhere. And I think that that's just such a true sentiment for any reader who's ever enjoyed a book. Like, you can be sitting there and you can be terrified of where we might end up, or, like just dreading what could come, but you're like, no, I'm with this character. I'll go anywhere with them. Like, that's just, I would be on this journey with them if I could.
Awesome. Hold on, I'm gonna stop the recording real quick. Okay, so how do you avoid this saggy middle? How do you keep readers engaged throughout the whole novel?
Oof. Oh boy. I think for me, following a structure is important. So I do use the Save the Cat beat sheet. I do it loosely, like I'm not married to it. And if something needs to change, that's fine. But that's helped me in the past. And I think that a lot of writers just naturally write using like a mental beat sheet. Like the first time I encountered Save the Cat was when I was writing the very first book we tried to sell. And I had already written like half or 2/3 of it. And so when I was going through the beat sheet, I realized I had hit a lot of those notes already. So it's like it can be a very natural process, but it's a great thing to hold your hand to, because, writing a book is hard. And like, I never learned how to do it. Like I did go to my high school was an arts high school, and I went for writing, but nobody can teach you in high school, or like even some university programs, like how to sit down and write a novel, because it's such a personal experience. So I think Save the Cat was great for me, but I know a lot of authors who use like the 5-act structure or like 3-act structure. So it's not leaning on these things, but it's using them when it can be helpful. So if you're in a point with the sagging middle and you're like, what am I supposed to do next? I think that finding that corresponding thing in Save the Cat, and you can twist it too, you don't have to follow it exactly, but if it was natural for us as a writer, I think it's natural for a reader too to read it and have certain expectations. So it can be really helpful. So that's what I rely on. And also just like, if it's not working for me as I'm writing, I have to then grapple with the idea that I've done something wrong, back down the line, and I have to go back and figure out where the wrong turn was. So it's just listening to my instincts about story and being like, okay, I have to admit to myself that if this is hard to write in this way, I must have done something wrong. So.
And how do you come up with a satisfying conclusion? Like, how do you end your stories?
Oh man, I think it's as a reader, I always want more at the end of my favorite books. So it's finding the balance between giving like the satisfying end, but also just a little bit more. Like, I don't know if you've read, I just watched The Idea of You, that Anne Hathaway movie. And I don't want to this spoilers or whatever, but in the movie it has a quite happy ending. But I got the book. I went to work the next day and immediately bought the book and started reading it. And the book apparently does not have that happy ending. So I think it's going to be a really interesting study in contrast, because the book had such a devoted following even without the happy ending. So I'm really intrigued to read how she makes it end, and then how the movie did it as well. So I think you just have to, I hate to talk about earning things again, but like, it is just, you can write the ending that you've earned as throughout the rest of the book. So you're giving them what they want, but I think it's so important to just leave a little bit more so that the reader can fill in the blanks kind of as to what they wanted the ending to be as well.
Love that. Love that. Love that. All right, I'm gonna backtrack a little because I should have asked you this earlier. You talked about the submission process. What was your editor call like? Was it on Zoom? Was it on the phone?
I have not had an editor call, actually. It happened around Christmas. So I think it was just such a crazy part of the season. So I knew that I was told that I'd get an offer in January. And then in January, I got the offer. And then in our long emails to each other since, that's when we've talked, but I did not have an editor call right away. So I am having a call soon. So hopefully I'll get some more info then. But yeah, in her emails, she's effusive. She's great. She's like super solid. I feel very lucky to have her, because I did study history. So I am like very particular about getting things right. And even with all that attention, I still got forms of address wrong in like Victorian England and stuff like that. And she's very well versed in that. So she's like the perfect partner.
I love that.
Yeah.
And you're probably fortunate, because when I had my call, I froze like a deer in headlights.
Oh my God, I would have too.
Thank God Susie was on the call so she could take up some of that psycho.
Yeah.
And I interview people all the time.
That's what the agent is good for.
I've even interviewed celebrities and stuff perfectly fine, but because this was such a lifelong dream and she had the power to give it to me or not, I froze.
Wow.
It's so dumb.
I'm sure it's more common than we think.
Mouth wide, waiting for
I
not my finest moment.
Yeah. I would be the exact same way.
But at least now you can go in. Yeah,
Sorry.
at least now you can go in with the confidence that you already have the deal. You know,
Exactly.
she likes it, so you can have a normal conversation.
Yeah.
What has been your biggest surprise so far with the publishing journey?
My biggest surprise, just how fulfilling it becomes when you hear from readers. Like, I knew that obviously that would be a really enjoyable part of the process, but writing an iconic character like Belle, people have a lot of expectations going in. So I sort of hardened myself before it came out, where I was like, I wrote the book I wanted to write and I'm proud of it, but like, obviously she's a character that so many people have loved for so long. Like, I'm going to disappoint some people. And so that was my attitude going in. Like, it's okay if people are disappointed. And so I didn't leave room to expect that some people would still really like it. So hearing from them has just been so amazing. And like, people who get what I was doing with Belle. So that has been just such a heartwarming part of the process. And you like to think like, I'm so hard. I don't need people to approve of it or whatever. But then you get that DM from a reader that's just like, you wrote Belle exactly how I imagined her, or you did this or whatever like that. And it's like, okay, it's that connection that we're all looking for, right? Like the way that you read a book and you read one line in a book and it just reaches into your exact experience and you're like, okay, I'm not alone. So having been a reader my whole life and having those moments, it's so amazing when you realize that you can have that moment as a writer. So I've loved that.
What tips do you have for historical romance writers?
Oh boy. Okay, well, I think the biggest one is that you have to have more than one idea because romance readers are voracious. So my book deal is a 3-book deal because it's in the same vein as Bridgerton. It's going to follow the siblings in a family. And yeah, so it's such a vibrant and like excited community that you're going to want to read a lot of romance, like in every subgenre, contemporary, sci-fi, like everything, get your footing in it. So I think that you know, when I read 70 plus in a row, like that was like my education in it really quick. And I was only really able to do that because of the pandemic. So small silver lining. And to just like, it's such a beautiful community that I think you need to put yourself out there so early with other writers of romance, because they're your peers. And with romance, you know, with the events, the signings, the things like that, like you find your community there. And just reaching out to people that you admire and respect. Like I can't believe some of the people that I consider friends now after reading their gorgeous, beautiful books. So it's really a community-based genre and category. So with readers and writers. So, you know, I've been looking at conventions now, just sort of getting an idea of them. And it's just, it's amazing how they come together and they'll bring hundreds of authors in and thousands of readers. And it's just so different. It's not different from YA. It's just, they know what they're doing with with romance conventions, and like YA can sort of be hard to, like Y'all Fest and Y'all West are great and stuff like that, but I just feel like they've got it down in the romance community, and it just really highlights how important it is to develop these relationships with your peers and with readers as well. So you have to be open to that. So for historical romance specifically though, I think readers are very discerning. I've seen a lot of reviews now that I'm like looking into this world, and people can be very particular about how modern characters can seem. Like there's so many authors I love and whose books I love, but who get sort of trashed for writing like overtly feminist characters sometimes, you know, and people are like, well, that's not how Victorian women were, or that's not how. So it's important, I think, to do your research so that you understand that though they were different, there were definitely feminist women in Victorian and Regency England, and their stories were important. So I think it's finding the realism. Sarah McLean has talked about this, where she says, like, you know, all of her characters have a basis in reality. She's not inventing feminism for the reader. It's like these women have always existed. So it's doing your research, but it's also just understanding that you, much like with Rebel Rose and a character that's iconic as Belle, you can't please everybody. So you can tie yourself up into knots about getting everything perfect, but at the end of the day, one reader is going to absolutely love what you did and another one's going to trash it. So it's feeling comfortable with the research that you do, with the work you put into it, and just letting go at the end of the day. So I did as much research as I could. I put as much history into it as I could, but I wanted my characters to live and breathe as well. So I didn't want to be tied down too tightly to conventions that won't speak to a modern reader, but I also didn't want to disrespect history, you know. So it's finding a balance there, but I love watching every movie I can get my hands on set in that time frame, and reading books written by contemporary at the time authors to get a real feel for how things were. So it's sort of like immersing yourself into as much of that world as you can, and then just doing what you want with it. So
I love that. What does your writing process look like now?
I have to not be a slow writer anymore. I'm a perfectionist, so it tends to take me a very long time to get a first draft done, but then my editing process is pretty straightforward. So it's like, you know, it's either going to be, I'm going to write a trash draft and then edit it forever, or my way, which is like I rewrite and rewrite so constantly, you know, like my writing sessions, when I sit down, it's like reading everything I've written up until that point and then starting it. So it can become quite slow, but I do then, like I said, emerge with a pretty clean draft. So I just have to somehow keep doing that, but also write faster. So you know, like I said, the romance timeline is quite quick. So I have to write book 2 in the next couple of months. And I'm hoping that just by sheer force of will, I can change the way I've written for so long. I did write Rebel Rose rather quickly, so I know I can do it. So I just have to put it into practice.
Now, did Rebel Rose sell on proposal, or did you write the full manuscript?
No, so I auditioned with, I think what I was told was 10,000 words or 3 chapters. And I wrote a prologue plus 3 chapters and submitted that. And then
so this was IP?
Yeah, it's IP, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know Rebel Rose was IP. That's cool. Who is it through?
Disney.
Okay, so this is Disney as well. I knew the first one was Disney, but the second one I didn't
Oh, it's
realize.
just, yeah. So Rebel Rose is my Disney book, and then A Lady Would Know Better is my romance.
Okay.
So that one I wrote the whole thing and sold it like that. And then Rebel Rose was the audition one. So
Okay.
yeah. But this one, no, the historical romance, I wrote the whole thing, and then I had pretty extensive pitches for books 2 and 3. And then that's why I think they bought all 3. But in a perfect world, I'll be able to write all the siblings in the series, and that would be 6 books. So we'll see.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Love it, love it, love it. So you're loving the Disney life right now, which is a good thing.
It came out a while ago. So we do have, since mine came out first, we've had a Mulan book in the same series by Livia Blackburn. And Alexandra Manier wrote the Jasmine book, which came out last year. And this year, Sarah Rash is, well, it's already done, obviously, but her Sleeping Beauty book is coming out. So hopefully I'll get to write more in the series, but it's out of my hands, but I definitely have ideas.
Out of curiosity, and you cannot answer if you can't answer, do they give you guys any theme park perks? Like, do you get free tickets?
No.
I
wish. Alex got to do a fun event last year where she spoke at Disney World. So, I think there's stuff like that, but
cool.
I've never been to Disney World or Land. So maybe I'll email my editor if I'm ever planning to go, be like, hey, any chance? Yeah, no, I wish.
Which is easier for you, writing an original idea or doing IP where they provide the idea?
Original for sure, because with the IP, even though I was able to change it so much to what I envisioned the story being, it's still, at the end of the day, it's not my characters. It's not, I did get to write new characters, obviously, in the book. And so there was like the opportunity to be creative and original in that way. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's like a tale as old as time. I didn't invent it. So I do love writing my own books, but writing IP was such a fun challenge that I have nothing against it and would definitely do it again. But what's interesting is that I've never written fan fiction. So I never did. I never read it growing up. I didn't write it. I'm a little bit too married to the idea that the author is the only one that can tell me about these characters. But I respect it immensely. And I know that it's been such a pivotal part of a lot of people's writing journeys, has been writing fanfic first. And then obviously it's pretty funny to me that my first published novel is essentially sanctioned fan fiction. So,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. I was just going to say what's funny too is how common IP is.
Yeah.
But most people don't realize that it's like a part of publishing, but it's how a lot of authors break in.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And not even, it's not even characters that we know. It's like in-house IP where the editor comes up with an idea and then an author. Yeah. So it's very cool, I think. Whatever opportunity you can take to break into the industry, I think is a great one.
Exactly. Just yesterday, I interviewed an author who her book is getting made into a Netflix series, and it was IP. And she has like tons and tons of books now. So,
exactly.
You wouldn't have known that, it's IP, but she was saying that IP has helped her keep the lights on because she does her original ideas, but she does IP every year. She's doing both.
Amazing. Yeah. No, I had such a great experience. And like, it was only, I think, through the uncertainties of the pandemic that really like slowed us down a little bit. Like we had to delay book 2 and stuff like that with the series. So I would love to write more for it. So it really depends on if people keep reading the series. So, and it's been the cool thing is it's been translated in so many different languages, and, it's gone on a journey that I don't know that my first book, if it wasn't IP, would have gone on. So that's a really cool thing too, is like hearing from Portuguese readers and, Spanish readers, French readers, German readers. So that's really fun as well.
What would you like to talk about that we haven't covered?
I think you've done a really great job. So I don't know that there's anything that we haven't discussed. It's been a great interview. So, well, I mean, not that it's part of the interview, but I'd love to know, like, what's your book about?
My book it's YA. It's a romantasy.
Ooh.
And it's like, it's got time travel. It's like Outlander meets the Night Circus. And it's these
oh my God, those are amazing comps.
Yeah. These 2 warring magical families and stuff like that.
Oh, what's the title?
Right now it's Heart's Gambit. I don't know if that's what they're going to keep or not yet because we haven't got that far in.
I love the title.
Thank you. I'm coming out fall of next year.
Oh my God, that's so exciting. I can't wait to read it.
When are you coming out exactly? What's the exact date?
January 28th.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm writing a book. Well, I'm writing a proposal, and we're going to go out on proposal with a romantasy. So fingers crossed, but an adult one. So
Yay. Romantasy seems to be very hot right now.
yeah, exactly. And like I, there's expectations in the adult romantasy world in terms of like spice level and stuff like that. And so I'm grateful that I've already written my romance novel, my historical romance, and now I feel a little bit more confident in that realm. So, obviously not every romantasy book needs to have that, but I just, as a reader, that's what I gravitate towards. So that's what I'm hoping to achieve.
That's awesome. What's the Canada writing community like?
Well, we're such a large country, so it's very hard to be super close. Like if there's an event in Toronto, I can sometimes it's 4 hours away, so it's not that close. But I have gone, when writing friends have had their events in Toronto, it's like a nice opportunity to go and meet them. So, I went and met Victoria Aveyard in Toronto a couple of years ago, and like my friend Alwyn Hamilton was there a few years ago. So I try to take that opportunity when I can. But Ottawa has its own sort of right now. The Ottawa International Writers Fest is going on. And they don't really do a lot of YA or sort of romance events. So let's hope we change that. But the bookstore I work at like provides the books for it and stuff. So I feel pretty connected to the writing community, even if it's not like in the way that I would love, like if we could do romance panels and stuff like that. So that's why I'm so happy that, readers, people, the girl I was talking to earlier, taking the initiative to sort of like pitch these kinds of events, because there's an audience for it. And like I said, there's like 6 of us who live in Ottawa. So we absolutely should be joining forces and doing stuff like that. But the other great thing about Ottawa is that I am pretty close to New York and stuff. So not that I've had the opportunity to, but when I was going to go to BEA and stuff, it wouldn't be quite the journey like that it would be if I was on like the West Coast or something. So, but I did get to go to Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con a couple of years ago for Rebel Rose. Like we did a Disney thing. So that was amazing and has like totally convinced me that if I'm ever asked if I want to do things like that, I absolutely want to do them forever going forward. Like however difficult it might make a travel day or something, like I would go.